So you're left with just the most important thing you can look at, and then you can, shoot down the enemy or whatever have you. But you can also see how this could be applied into non-military uses, right? Like, you guys have seen the stock traders who have like 20 screens in front of them. They're trying to track all these different things, and they're stressed out and popping Tums and, going crazy. Well, what if they were wearing this OGCOG hat, and so when things got really intense in a particular trade, all those other screens would actually just sort of dissolve away, and they could focus on the one main screen. And there's technology like that available now. I don't know if any of you are writers have seen Write Room, which is a software package that eliminates everything else on the screen, so all you're left with is basically what you would see if you had a typewriter, which is just the page, and you don't have any of this formatting, crazy stuff from Microsoft Word. You just have a screen, and it dissolves everything else, and you can focus on what it is that you're writing. So I think we're going to start to see some of this. We'll see it in video games first, of course, but then it'll move, I think, into business applications. And this, in fact, points at the next future force that I want to talk about, which is as we understand more about how the brain operates, how the brain works, we're going to be able to start to apply that to the way we engage and communicate and connect with each other. And this is an area that's of particular interest in the marketing and advertising world, right? The more we learn about how the brain works, the more we can understand the triggers and the methods to persuade people, hopefully in open and honest and transparent ways, right? To give them information to make better choices as consumers. Now, I just like to use this picture because it makes me happy, basically. But I think it also points at something else that we're starting to understand, which is the science of happiness, right? You may have heard about this, a new kind of science of happiness, positive psychology, this kind of movement. We're starting to understand what actually makes us happy. And surprisingly, it's oftentimes not what we thought. I'm going to read this because I think this study is very interesting. In 2008, researchers from the University of British Columbia, these are psychologists, found that spending money on other people promotes happiness in oneself more than buying for oneself, right? So these people who were engaged in things like pro-social spending, gifts for other people, and charity were actually happier. And what that tells you is that money, in fact, can buy happiness, but only if you spend the money on other people. And I think that when marketers and advertisers and consumers, if you want to call them that, start to understand that, it's really going to change the kind of messages we want to present, and the messages that people who create products and sell products and market products will want to use to try to engage people, right? So don't forget it. Money can buy happiness, but you're happiest when you're actually spending that money on other people. Meanwhile, cheaper and easier technologies for scanning people's brains are going to enable us to even gain more insight into how we become happy and the kinds of messages that affect us most. Many of you have probably heard of neuromarketing, right? About 10 years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, it got a lot of hype. The idea was that you could put somebody in an MRI machine and scan their brain as they were watching a commercial and see what parts of their brain lit up, and then you could design a better commercial. And there was a lot of controversy when this got out. People are talking about the battle for the mind and subliminal advertising and all these kinds of things. And the reality was a lot of that was hype, right? It's not as easy. Our brain is very complex. We've barely scratched the surface at our understanding of it, and it's a lot more complex than seeing, oh, well, this picture of this person causes, the brain that's, receptive to sexual imagery to light up, and so that's why we should insert that into this ad. It doesn't work like that. But now that the hype has calmed down, people are actually doing real research around neuromarketing. This is a project done by, you may have seen in the Wall Street Journal, this image, by Dr. Carl Marcy, who's a Harvard psychologist, and also started a company called Interscope. And he was hired by Campbell's to develop a new soup label, right? Too bad Warhol's not around to participate. But what he did is rather than doing just brain scans And he didn't put people in an MRI machine. It's like not, you know, watching an ad while you're in this steel tube and you can't move isn't very conducive to a good study. Instead, he hooked them up to various other physiological sensors to measure, you know, how sweaty you were, whether you were leaning forward or leaning back, you know, various other characteristics that revealed your engagement. And then he followed up with some really deep interviews and things like that. And what he came up with was a new soup label. And you can see what they've done is they've broken down to show actually the different things that were added here, okay? So one of the things that they showed was steam rising from the soup itself was actually really effective in inducing a feeling of authenticity, of a feeling of enjoyment of the product. And there were many others. You can look up that slide online and see the kinds of things that neuromarketing enabled them to do when designing a new label. So when people are reaching into our minds, in a sense, okay, and we're reaching back, and we're spending so much time in virtual worlds, in mediated experiences, where people are spending so much time in virtual environments, in instant message, online, engaging through mediated channels, what is it that we're missing, and what is it that we're seeking? What we're seeking is authenticity, right? Authenticity, visceral, real, physical, tangible experiences. The experience of getting our hands dirty, if you will, right? And this gets at the maker culture and the do-it-yourself culture that some of you may have heard a little bit about, and I'm going to talk about. You know, we've always been a country of makers. Before Popular Science was a magazine about, you know, now it's a magazine about seeing technologies that you simply can't afford to buy, right? The new shiny thing that you're never going to be able to afford, or some of which you may be able to afford, or Apple's new iPad. But before that, Popular Science in the 50s was about building and making technology so that it worked for you. This is a cover story. I just love the image, right? It's a one-person submarine. I don't know where the guy's body is, but, you know, what that was about was getting your hands dirty and engaging in a participatory experience rather than a culture of consumption and planned obsolescence and things like that. So that's becoming reborn in Make Magazine. Make Magazine, it's no accident that the format and the shape of Make is the same as Popular Science from the 1950s. Make Magazine and Maker Faire is all about celebrating how people are learning to do things for themselves. And it doesn't mean that everybody is going to start, you know, making robots and building their own iPhones and things like that. But it gets at the fact that people want to feel engaged. They want to feel connected. They want to participate in the products that they buy and alter them in very special ways. And it goes beyond sort of the mass customization movement. And then, of course, there are the people on the other end of the spectrum who actually want to make everything from scratch. This is called this is a pool heater that a guy made. So he calls it the redneck pool heater. That's what he calls it. And so it actually pumps water from his swimming pool into these pipes on a gas grill and then pumps them back into the pool. Now, I don't know how much time it took him to make it, or you know how much it would compare in cost and time to actually just buying a pool heater, but it gives him a great, you know, conversation starter when people come over to his house for a swim. So what does this maker culture look like online? This is Instructables.com. They call it the world's biggest show and tell. And this is a place where people post instructions step by step on how to make just about anything you can imagine. You can tens of thousands of things. You type into Instructable what you're interested in learning how to make, everything from, you know, a Christmas tree ornament to a new engine for your car, and somebody has posted step-by-step guide on how to do it. And it's all free. People are posting there because they're contributing to the commons, right? Their hope is that by contributing and sharing in that way, when it's time for them and they need something, it'll be there for them as well. And Instructables and sites like it, this do-it-yourself community, provides a really interesting place to engage with brands. You know, people have talked to me and said, oh, well, this maker culture, Maker Faire, these kinds of things are really all, you know, against the brands, and they hate the big companies and this kind of thing. And that's so far from true. That's so far from true. If any of you have been to Maker Faire, big companies sponsor Maker Faire. They have pavilions where they showcase their technology in ways that highlight what people can do with them, what people can use their technology to make.